In the summer of 1876, Queen Victoria assumed the title Empress of India. She ruled an empire that stretched across the globe, and in doing so, proved to the world that authority was not necessarily tied to masculinity. India has a long history of powerful female rulers, and although many British bureaucrats in 19th century India opposed the idea of women holding positions of power, the fact that Britain's own ruler was a queen negated any official arguments against a woman's ability to rule. Through an exploration of 3 fascinating works of art, this video shines a spotlight on the powerful and assertive royal women of 19th century India. The first woman I'd like to introduce you to is Begum Hazrat Mahal. Hazrat Mahal was the wife of Majd Ali Shah, the last king of Awadh. And after her husband was deposed, she famously took charge in Lucknow and led the uprising of 1857. This is the only painting of her known to survive, and dates from around 1850. Hazrat Mahal stands proudly, hand on her hip, in front of her seated husband. And when you look closely, you can see that the portrait is in fact based on a real photograph of her, taken by the court photographer in Lucknow. Hazrat Mahal was from a poor family. Her father was an enslaved African, and when she was very young, she joined the royal palace to be trained as a singer and a dancer. The king was attracted to her sophistication and her intelligence, and he eventually made her one of his official wives. During the 1857 uprising, Hazrat Mahal united Indians of all religions, all races, and all levels of society, and even appeared on the front line of the battlefield. Although she was named as an active enemy of the British state, the Times in London wrote that Hazrat Mahal showed more sense and more courage than all of her generals put together. Hazrat Mahal's battle for independence failed, but she rejected the offer of a British pension and instead fled to Nepal, where she lived for another 20 years as a symbol of resistance against British rule in South Asia. This painting is in a manuscript that was found by Sikh soldiers in Lucknow during the uprising and was later presented as a gift to Queen Victoria. The next of our royal Indian women is Shah Jahan Begum, the Begum of Bhopal. She was the third of 4 strong female rulers of Bhopal, then the second largest Muslim state in British India. This portrait was taken by a photographer of the Bourne and Shepherd studio in Calcutta, and it dates to 1872, the year the Begum was appointed Knight Grand Commander of the Order of the Star of India. And you can see she's wearing the robes, the star, collar and sash of this order in the photograph. She stands with confidence and glares outwards, directly engaging with the viewer, who struggles to look anywhere else but straight into her piercing eyes. Shah Jahan Begum was a devout Muslim and lived and ruled in Purdah, which meant that she always wore a veil in the company of men, including for this meeting with the Prince of Wales in 1875. But for this portrait, Shah Jahan Begum was content to be photographed without a veil, although it is likely that the photographer remained under the camera's hood, or perhaps the image was actually taken by a female photographer. Shah Jahan Begum chose to stand resting her gloved hand on a table on which there is a vase of flowers and 2 books, props deliberately placed there to proudly assert both her femininity and her education. She was a prolific writer in both Urdu and Persian, and published her works as part of a passionate campaign to advance women's education in her state. This photograph is from an album presented to Queen Victoria, a powerful image for her of a modern and educated female Indian ruler. The final woman I'd like to introduce you to is Mahaprabhu Tampurati, a princess of the Travancore royal family of present-day Kerala. Her name might not be familiar to you, but you may recognise that of her father, the artist Raja Ravi Varma, one of the best-known figures in Indian art history. It was he who painted this portrait of Mahaprabha, which depicts her holding an unusual silver casket in the shape of a book on a silver tray. This casket supposedly contains a written speech addressed to Queen Victoria from the women of Kerala, and was sent to the Queen on the occasion of her Golden Jubilee. The Travancore royal family followed a matrilineal system of succession in which status and titles passed down the female rather than the male line. In 1924, when the Maharaja of Travancore died with no female heirs, It was Mahaprabhu's daughter who then became regent of the kingdom. Mahaprabhu Tampurati's portrait is a symbol of her status and identity. She wears the embroidered red shawl associated with the royal women of Travancore, and instead of conforming to European notions of female modesty, she proudly asserts local traditions by baring her shoulder. Neither does she appear coy, but instead she invites and sustains a very firm gaze. Ravi Varma's painting of his daughter created a personal encounter between an Indian royal woman and the woman whose empire ruled much of the world. At a time when Mahaprabhu's status and power was threatened by Victorian Britain, the painting shows her allegiance to the Queen, but it is also an important act of self-representation as a modern, progressive woman determined to retain her own cultural identity.